all set?
Yep.
Then we can open up this work session on 15th of August, Southampton Village, ZBA 2020.
It's September.
Oh, September, thank you. At least I didn't say October. All right, we have some decisions, right? We have to approve the minutes first. Anybody have anything to say about the minutes? We had to correct the ones the last time, but this time I think they look all right.
They looked all right to me. I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good. Now we got some decisions from our attorney. We got 3066 Aisa Realty. We got 3074 Anthony Paduano. We got 3078 BHNH 109 Hampton Road. And we got 412 First Deck Lane. Meredith Joyce we can't do yet. It's Andrew and Dana Stone, I guess we're going to keep that open for a while.
Well, that's check. The wetlands determination.
Yeah, that one is 359 Meadow Lane?
No, 527 Meadow Lane, number 3036. The wall.
Right.
Wall.
That one we need to discuss. We closed it the last hearing, and there should be some discussion on that.
Do we have any new information?
Only that I know that the board has had concerns continuing with respect to the placement of a retaining wall within wetlands and within a wetland buffer. I did check. There was a representation made by the applicant's representative at the last meeting that they addressed an alternative that would involve a graded stabilized slope. The best I could find on that was that they did address it verbally, or at least in narrative in one of their response letters, but there was no real detail or information or plans to support the assertions. And it really just kind of referred back to the fact that they have a DEC permit and that it was their opinion that the wall would have less of an impact. But there was no real study of that alternative that the zoning board has repeatedly asked for. I can tell you that I contacted the State Department of Environmental Conservation and had a conversation with them about the zoning board's concern.
Chick, it's very hard to hear you. You're getting quite muffled. Is there anything on your speaker?
Nothing whatsoever. It should be clear. I'll
Keep trying.
turn my volume down a little. Maybe it's distorting. I did speak to the DEC, and they understood the issue that the zoning board is having with this application. They said that they do look for no net loss of wetlands. So if there is some type of a fill action in order to grade a slope, that would have to be justified and that there would have to be mitigation. There would be an opportunity to describe the existing collapsed wall that is covering wetlands and how that would be removed. But it may be necessary for some other type of mitigation to be incorporated into the project. In other words, some other portion of the property that could be created into wetlands or expanded buffer. And that the state would be willing to work with the applicant to explore those options if that was their wish to do so. So we're really at a position where the hearing was closed at the last meeting, and we're coming up on a point where a decision should be made, at least based on the record. The village's standards for issuing a permit do have a section chapter 116-19.4, which is to maximize setbacks of structures from wetlands. And in this case, the zoning board has pretty consistently indicated that you feel that the applicant is not maximizing the setback of a structure from wetlands. And there's also under 116-19.4 reference to the applicant having the burden of proof to demonstrate that they meet the standards for issuance of a permit. So at this point, I'm looking for direction on how to proceed with application based on the fact that the hearing was closed at the last meeting.
Oh, if we're gonna hear more on it, we're gonna have to reopen it, right?
I believe Chick's looking for the board's input.
Correct.
Well, my feeling is there's something new to explore. We should explore it. We've asked them to explore it. They sort of always punted and went back to their wall, and that really having that sloped decision was never fully discussed or presented.
Well, the fear is it would wash out, right?
I don't know, Chick, when you talked, you thought that the slope would not wash out, correct?
Well, it has to be done very carefully. It's an area that is not subject to dynamic wave action. It is subject to the rise and fall of the tide. It is experiencing erosion now because it's an exposed slope. And what we talked about at the last meeting was some type of treatment that might involve core log base and a stabilized slope using geotextile mat that would be biodegradable and that it would have to be planted heavily. I did review a survey that the applicant submitted that has spot elevations, but not really enough information to develop a cross-section or to fully understand the relationship of the slope with respect to the property line. So there's a little bit of deficient information there. Certainly it was sufficient in the case of a wall, but if you're going to design a stabilized slope, the survey information that I saw did not look to be adequate. But those are things that the applicant would need to explore. So I do think, Dan, I understand your input on this. We could certainly hear from the other board members. And then procedurally, I think we need to hear from David Kirst on what the options are from a process standpoint for you at this point.
Are there any real reasons why we can't just let them go rebuild the wall?
Say that again, Kevin?
Are there any real serious reasons why we can't let them rebuild the wall? I mean, after all, the wall was there 100 years. Next one might be there 100 years too.
Yeah, we've been through this many times, so I know that Dan has had a strong opinion. I certainly feel that creating a structure in wetlands and buffer that would not typically be permitted is a potential for an adverse impact. Again, going back to the record, the applicant has indicated that this would remove the wall that has collapsed and that they would restore the buffer area after construction. Construction itself could compact soils and potentially impact those wetland areas and change the character. There may be ways to mitigate or manage that, and the applicant has included notes on their plan that they will restore those areas. A wall in itself would achieve the purpose of stabilizing the slope and controlling runoff, but it would be a substantial structure in the wetlands. And Kevin, your point is true that there has been a wall there historically, but that wall has failed. And now we're kind of at a decision point. Do we support that type of structure that would not have been permitted under today's circumstances, or look for some other alternative? I think the other board members should weigh in, but certainly those are the issues. And it's up to the ZBA with my input to help you through the decision as much as I can from an environmental standpoint.
So the question I have, Chick, is from your perspective, does the creation of the vegetative buffer have less of an environmental impact and less potential for an adverse environmental impact than the building of the wall?
Well, I believe that it would enhance habitat, that it would not include a substantial structure in and near the wetlands. And if done properly, it would have the same effect of controlling the potential for erosion and stabilizing the slope. It would require a small amount of fill. And as per my conversation with DEC, partial justification would be the removal of the collapsed wall, and other potential mitigation could be included that the applicant would have to propose that would ameliorate the impacts. So on balance, if that were to occur, I think that would have less environmental impact.
Less environmental impact with the wall or less environmental impact with the slope?
With a stabilized slope, vegetated to create habitat and stabilization and control runoff, and some form of mitigation, which would include removal of the collapsed wall and potentially another mitigation area on the property.
They would still have to go back there and they would still be trampling the ground. There would still be disturbance of what's there now, right? Whether it's a slope or a wall, it's going to be men in there working and disturbing the environment.
Core logs and a stabilized slope would require less construction equipment and a less aggressive installation than a wall itself, which would require more equipment and more compaction.
Okay. I think I understand.
So let me be the first to say that I have found this case to be confounding in terms of we've been listening to different points of view almost a year. And my understanding had been for virtually every prior meeting until this most recent public meeting that the stance was that to rebuild the wall under any circumstances was not in the best interests of the wetlands. I also had understood that, and I'm looking for feedback about where I have missed this. I had also understood that the fill that had been put in by the neighbor, in fact, had been partially caused this issue to happen. But I had also heard and believed over many meetings that the erosion that was going to take place had taken place, and that the water and the land would find its natural settling point and had done so already. But what I understood at our last meeting, which clearly I didn't understand something, was that erosion has continued and that there has been a deleterious effect to both the applicants and to their neighbors' land in terms of erosion because the wall was not there. And that some kind of a artificial device, whether it was flooring, biodegradable, slope, was then, I heard it as being strongly recommended as being the only way to go. I have missed something in this, because while we closed it because I thought we were ready to finalize our discussion, but it doesn't seem as though we actually are. That is my whole statement, and I'm hoping that all of you can help me understand what I have missed.
I don't think you've missed anything. I think we've heard both pro and con. We've heard from the applicant and we've heard from Chick.
Chick, I feel as though you initially had said that you were in agreement that putting in or replacing the wall was not in the best interest, and putting anything in, but that it was finding its natural place. That's not accurate. There's been further erosion, is that right? Or was that
The
just,
last- Yeah, prior to the last meeting, I visited the site to verify the conditions.
Yeah.
And I reported back to the board that there is in fact, in effect, a vertical slope that is subject to erosion still. The collapsed wall, just the way the wall has fallen, if you can picture the thickness of the wall on its side,
right?
it's actually retaining some of the soil that is subject to erosion. If it were left as it is, I believe that the erosion would extend further into the neighbor's property to the west. And that's why some means of stabilization is necessary. One method is a wall, and that has been explored, as you said. And the other method would be some type of stabilized slope, which began to be discussed in more detail at the last meeting based on my field inspection and further review. Prior to that, it was the board's input to the applicant that the wall could go up to the point of wetlands within the
Right.
buffer, not beyond. And again, part of my field inspection was to verify that there would be a gap and to clarify that with the applicant. So that was all discussed at the last meeting.
Right.
You being at the last meeting, I think you have all of the information, and it seems like you had a pretty accurate summary.
But Chick, what I'm hearing pretty clearly is that the stabilized slope accomplishes the same goals with less of an environmental impact and less potential for an adverse environmental impact.
With the parameters that I outlined before. If it's done
Right.
properly, it would encroach into wetlands, which would be an impact. We would certainly look to minimize that. It would result in the removal of the collapsed wall, which would take away an impact to the wetlands. And there may be a need in the justification to have the DEC modify their permit for additional mitigation on the property. So with those parameters, I believe it would have less impact.
So could we have a decision that denies the wall, but suggests this other form of retention? Where you just
Yeah,
suggest sort of a slope, hay bales, or whatever.
Well, the zoning board through chapter 116 would have to, justify that decision. As I said before, under subsection E, there's definite concern for structures in and near wetlands. It is the applicant's onus to demonstrate that they meet the standards. And you have the ability to, place conditions or suggest modifications. So again, with council's input, I believe we can do something along those lines.
True, David?
Yes, I believe that would be true.
So we could write a decision that denies the wall, but suggests some other form of modification.
Or denies part of the wall. I don't know what the board's perspective is on the upland section of the wall versus in the wetland section of the wall. So that's still,
I don't know if we spent that much time discussing the upland portion. I think that's still there, right?
no, well, there's 100 foot of the wall is to be replaced, and approximately, it looks like more than half of that is not in the wetland.
And that has not fallen.
No, that has fallen.
Right, there's about a 100-foot section. It spans the buffer and the wetlands. And this was part of the discussion at the last meeting. If the wall were just to go to the edge of wetlands, there would be a gap that would continue to be subject to potential erosion. Would it be possible to split the design and have the wall up to the wetlands and a stabilized slope beyond that? That may be possible. We could, I don't want to get into designing this for the applicant, but that may provide, let's say, a more palatable alternative in the applicant's view, as long as they control runoff properly and don't divert runoff from along that wall section to the gap area. But something like that may be possible. Again, it would be up to the applicant to design it, get the elevations, come up with a cross section, show how they would stabilize it with vegetation and control runoff. And we can certainly identify those parameters in this decision that we're talking about now.
I have no problem with them rebuilding the wall in the upland portion. I still, how much, if you build this part that's in the upland, how much a gap is left after you've built that part? So how much would have to be done with slope? But how many feet?
Let me see if I can pull up a plan if you'll give me a moment. My recollection is it was about half, but that's an. Just be another minute or two.
On the most recent plan, it's scaled
Have
out
it.
to 40 feet in the wetland.
Correct. And I can show the pictorial. It's 40 feet that would be unprotected as they have indicated, and 60 feet that would be protected by a rebuilt wall. Their visual kind of exaggerates the whole condition to the extent that they're really not looking at other potential design options to address the runoff, but it's informative. I think I'm screen sharing. For some reason, the view is not showing up well here.
No, I've got your screen.
Is that visible?
Yes,
Okay.
we got 40 feet.
Placed here, there would need to be a method of controlling runoff. Now, keep in mind that this is on the neighbor's property, so that does get a little more complicated. If there is runoff that's directed to this area, it could be subject to more energy and therefore more erosion potential if what happens here actually occurs. And this is the area that we're talking about would have to be stabilized and have enough vegetation to dissipate the runoff.
So the upland now does have a wall, right? 26 feet,
A portion of it.
portion of it.
There's 62 feet, sorry, 26 feet of upland existing wall.
Right, right. That's what it shows on this.
Right here.
So then you have a great expanse that's not protected.
But Chick, just for the record, what's the condition of the 62 feet of wall that's south of the wetlands line?
Well, it's heavily vegetated. I've seen that several times. It appears to be in relatively good condition. The top tile plates in some areas have come off. I'm not a structural engineer, so it's a little hard to comment, but it didn't seem in danger of imminent collapse to me. It also was not subject to the fill activity that this one was next to the house. So there's less static pressure on the side of the wall than perhaps there was here that may have contributed to the failure of this section.
I mean, the easiest fix is probably the wall, because if you say they no to that wall in the part that we're talking about, we're gonna go through another 6 months of something that may or may not work.
Something that may or may not work.
In other words, if we tell them, no, you can't do the wall, then they're gonna have to do 6 months of work of designing anew, working with the neighbor, designing a planting plan, and then coming back to us. If we say, look, just fill that, you can connect the wall, it's done. You know, the fill, runoff of the fill is protected. It's the least favorable of the choice, because to me, the wetlands can't speak for themselves. We have to speak for the wetlands. So I'm like, whatever works best to protect the wetlands is where I'd want to go. And Chick is saying that it's marginally better to not have the wall. But it seems like it's close.
I'm not hearing the same thing you're hearing, Dan, from Chick.
What are you hearing, Mark?
I'm not hearing words like marginally better. I'm hearing Chick say, we should avoid building structures in the wetlands, that's in the zoning code, that we do not build structures in the wetlands, and that there's an alternative that will accomplish the same purposes and have less of an environmental impact. And, to me,
I'm in favor of that, so we can send them back and go back and have them start over again.
I mean, that's where I am. But Dan, that's where I thought we were from the beginning. We were listening, and I thought we were being.
The only thing that changed is now we found out there was additional erosion. So it's like, do you do a quick fix and do the wall, or do we really study this and make them come back and fix it like what Chick would recommend as a well-engineered slope? I'm in favor of that, but I also heard that to do the slope, they have to slope into wetlands. So in other words, now you're going to be eliminating some of the wetlands. And then he said that what would you have to do, Chick? Recapture additional wetlands somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, again, everybody can interpret what they hear from me. And I'll always try and clarify and be very straightforward. This is a tough call. The option of not having a wall does require cooperation between the neighbors. When I looked at the spot elevations that were provided from the last survey, it's very difficult to tell, would they have to do grading into the neighbor's property? Runoff would have to be controlled, and you do have a slope situation, so you would need heavy vegetation. And I did say at the last meeting that would have to include the neighbor's property. We talked about, and the applicant was really using the DEC's permit as leverage. So I contacted the DEC on behalf of the village and the zoning board to get their input. And their input was, well, fill in wetlands is not our first choice. We look to avoid, minimize, and mitigate. The first thing is avoid. So it's avoid, fill in the wetlands. When I explained the situation of this board's concerns, it kind of went to minimize. Okay, how can you do it with as little disturbance as possible? And if there is disturbance in the wetlands, then mitigate. And that's how the Environmental Conservation Law, Article 25 and Part 661 are set up. And our village code references those laws. So that's all relevant. So it is complicated. It would send the applicant back to have to deal with the topography, deal with the neighbor, come up with a solution, and potentially mitigate the fill action because it's not being avoided. Honestly, this happens very rarely, but the applicant has built a record that indicates that Number one, the collapsed wall is an impact on the wetland. They've quantified that amount. A wall placed at the property line would stabilize the properties. It would control the erosion. It would remove the collapsed wall. And they're saying that they could rebuild the wetlands. So, or restore it, which I believe is true because, the wetlands are doing very well in that area and there's no reason to believe they couldn't come back. It's kind of what Kevin said before. We are restoring that pre-existing condition to before the wall collapsed. If we turn back the clocks to the early 1900s, we would not have permitted this wall in the first place. So, all I can do is be straight with you and tell you that it is a close call. I could write a permit and support it. I could write a denial and support it. And my guess would be that, there may be a court intervention to determine which is correct. David's territory, but we do have to think about that as well. We want to serve the wetlands. You guys speak for the wetlands. And there are also property owners' rights issues here as well. So there is a record built by the applicant, and it's a tough call.
Well, the neighbor is very much in favor of having a wall. So would she go along with this other option?
I just want to, let me just add to that quickly is if she will, this board can't force her to, or make this permit conditioned upon any sort of grade change on her property unless she signs on to that.
Right.
So ideally, any sort of mitigation and grading, I believe should have to be contained to the applicant's property in making this decision.
There's no way it would work if you only tried to put the slope on the applicant's property because it has to slope up onto the neighbor's property. So it
Right,
has to
and the
be-
board can't force that.
Yeah.
Well, we could just deny it and see what they come back with after that. See if they have another application. That's
Yeah,
one way.
you can do that.
We could just say no to the wall and see what they come back with. That puts the ball back in their court.
We're not backed up by any time constraint.
Well,
Well,
the longer it drags out, the more chance we'll have erosion.
That part is true.
The applicant has made that point in their paperwork.
Yes.
Right, but we've proposed that the applicant could do a vegetative sloping and eliminate the erosion. I mean, we've been nothing but, kind of accommodating as far as listening to both sides, deliberating, taking everybody's position, to heart. And there is an alternative to the wall that will stop the erosion. It's up to the applicant to say, okay, I'll take advantage of that option and I'll stop the erosion that way.
So we could deny the wall and say in our decision, we believe there are other ways to handle this problem.
They should explore other ways to handle the problem.
And see what they say.
Julia, what do you think?
I'm supportive of that. I'm supportive of Kevin's idea that he's just stated, which is deny the wall. And because frankly, that's where I believe that we had been all along until just this last meeting, and have them seek alternatives. I do have the sense about the applicant and the neighbor are working together to try to resolve this issue at this point. So I'm not sure it's off the table that they would be able to do that. I mean, they've said as much in our meetings. It's where the impression comes from.
Check if they did the slope and the revegetation. Do they still have to come back to approval to us for that? We're not building anything anymore.
Well, it is fill in the wetland and, you know, that is specific to regulated activity.
Okay.
So I believe they would.
I agree with Kevin also. I think that's what, just send them back to the drawing board.
David,
Seems like
can you write that?
everyone else, sorry.
Denying the wall, and maybe you could suggest in the decision that we believe there are other ways to do it, and we wait for the applicant to come up with other ways. You don't have to use those exact words, but in that vein.
Yes, I will structure it accordingly.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chick, for all your work on this one.
Well, it's, as I said, it's not an easy one,
No, it's not.
but you've been quite consistent and, you know, I've looked to answer all the questions and we certainly have a clear direction.
Good.
Kevin, did we skip 3045, the Meredith Joyce?
They don't want to have it, they've asked to wait till we have a fifth member.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Do you mind it? Can we go back, Kevin? Just
No, go back. Sure.
it was discussed that maybe there was a, a great deal of precedent for waiting for the fifth member. Is that your understanding? That
No. We have done it, but we have also done decisions when there were only 4 members. We've done decisions when there were 3 members at the meeting. Usually in that
David-
case, we give them the option, look, there's only 3 of us. You need all 3 votes. Do you want us to wait or you want us to give the decision?
But my question is, when you were waiting, was it because somebody was just missed one meeting, they were on vacation, or is it that you didn't even have?
Happened to miss 1 meeting.
Right. So do we have any precedent where we had 4 board members and that was the situation consistently, and then we still held off on a vote?
Usually, if we ask the applicant at the meeting, they'll usually say, go ahead, vote. That's my recollection.
Did we ask?
Well, I always ask if there were 3 members.
But this case, the lawyers
Well,
requested that we don't vote unless we have 5.
Right.
So they sort of answered the question. If we had asked it, that's what their answer would be. Don't vote on it, wait till you have 5 members.
John's the one that told us that he had a right to demand that there be 5 votes.
So he always tells us what we,
So David, what are the
The
facts?
board-
Because
the
we're a quorum if we were 4 or 5.
The board is a duly constituted board with 4 members and can vote
We can
if
vote
the
for
board
3.
wants.
What John's afraid of that the vote's going to be 2-2. And I think there's a very good chance of that. Just judging what I've heard during these meetings.
Yeah, but I just think at this point, if that's the vote, that's the vote. The idea of having this 5th board member come on and not doing the mailings again. I mean, I just don't know where we stand right now. So every time I see that, I don't know that going forward and having a 5th member, that just doesn't seem the right way to go.
Well, we may well have 3 no votes here.
But if we're a quorum, why can't we vote?
That's a good question.
You can. Legally, you can vote.
So why wouldn't we? I mean, frankly, I feel as though we're beginning to fall behind in our work between delays here and there. And this is something where we were prepared to take a vote. And if in fact we are properly constituted, is there anything that would keep us from it? Other than accommodating the request of the attorney who asked for a 5th member, but it's been some time now since we've had one, and who knows when we will have one.
Yeah, and he's going to take it to court if he doesn't like the decision. Anyway, whether we have 5 or 4, he's going to take it to court if he doesn't like the decision.
Well, definitely not if what you said is, comes true too. If there's 3 votes against, there's really nothing to talk about.
No, Because there'd be 3 votes would lose it, whether it's 5 members or 3 members or 4 members.
Okay, so where do we think we are?
I think there are 3 against it.
Okay.
I vacillated on this one, but my mind's made up now.
So you could vote on it. I'd be the only one in favor, and then and then you guys would be a denial. So if you want to vote on it, that's fine.
They're putting a lot on this one property. You know, and they have a house now that they got, which conforms to the zoning, and they've also got a pool house or a guest house, whatever it's going to
Yeah,
be.
but I looked at it when they started the project. The house that they want to do, they would have been allowed to do, but the ARB strung them out for 3 years, and then the law changed, and they got hit by the bus. You know, I don't think it was a mistake of theirs.
I'm really concerned with these people coming in. They can get 4,500 square feet, now they want 5,000. And somebody has, they want,
I understand it, you know.
like the one that's on Cooper's Farm. You know,
So should we vote on it, or?
well,
Excuse me, board, I just want to let you know that John Bennett does have his hand up. I know this is a work session. I just wanted you to be aware of that.
he's in attendance or he's listening to us.
He's in attendance, but he has his hand up as to wanting to comment.
Well, he's only going to say what he said before. Unless he's got something new to say, what's the point? Ask him if he has something new to say.
John, could you text me? Could you privately chat me, please, to see if you have something new to say?
John has just typed to all of us that he has something new to say.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just saw that, board members.
Okay.
So would you like me to let him, yes, new to say. Okay, hold on, John, I'm coming.
Let's let him in.
Okay, John, I just need you to unmute and turn your camera on. Okay, John, can we hear you? Could you speak for a second?
Hello?
Okay, good. We're all good to go.
I have a little bit of advantage of most of you people. I've been practicing before the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Southampton since 1982. Okay? And I've been very familiar with the practices and the procedures and the customs of the board. And at no time
We lost you.
We literally froze.
no time and declined. That establishes a custom and a procedure of the board, regardless of what the regulations and rules of the village law of the state of New York or the village code say. That is the custom and practice and procedure.
You're freezing
Hello?
again. You're freezing.
Hello?
That's the issue.
John, I'm sorry, we have a very bad connection.
Hello?
John,
Hello?
can you hear us?
Hello?
We're able to hear you. Can you hear us?
Now I can.
Okay.
Okay. So for the, what is that? 1982, the 38 years, because before I opened up my practice in 1987 in Southampton, I would come out from New York and represent people in Southampton. So for 38 years, I've been practicing before this board, and never, 38 years, never has a request by an applicant, remember, it's my application, no one is prejudiced by waiting. No one is prejudiced. Usually when delay, can you hear me?
Yes,
We
we
can
can.
hear you.
Okay. Usually when in the law you look at someone's complaining about a delay, the thing you focus on is the prejudice to the person who's complaining that the delay is hurting them. There's no prejudice whatsoever to the board. The potential prejudice is the applicant. It's my application. I'm asking you to do nothing other than submit and be consistent with the practice of this board for the 38 years that I have been practicing before it. And I think, and I say this to you as an officer of the court, and based upon my experience and knowing that you will rely upon it, I have never seen an application where somebody requested a vote of 5 members of the board that it was denied, number one. Number two, you have a village election happening this evening, okay? And in all likelihood, there will be the votes to fill, either way, regardless of what happens, there's going to be the votes to fill a vacancy because the deadlock on the village board will be gone. And everybody knows this, so you can't bury your head in the sand about that either, because everybody knows that. Regardless of what happens, somebody's going to have a majority and able to fill, in order to fill the vacancy on your board. So it's no harm for you. The harm is to the applicant. I shouldn't be denied what everybody has been allowed, which is the right for 5 members. And that's a procedure that you guys, and a custom that you guys have established. And it's never, in my experience, been altered. Why would you do it now? That would be contrary. Once you establish a procedure, that's procedure. If you want to change it, you have to change it by law.
Okay, so we asked, I don't know if you were around, John, we asked Kevin and Dan, who, you know, have some years of experience, if they had ever encountered this situation before where there were only 4 board members. Are you referring to some cases that you can remember that you can provide us where there were 4 board members and the applicant requested to wait for the 5th board member?
Mark, you're not hearing what I'm saying. What I'm telling you is that in all my years of practice, 38 years of practice before the board, whenever an applicant requested a full vote of the 5 board members, okay, that was allowed. Now, the fact that you don't have a 5th board member because of a deadlock in village politics should not inure to my detriment. And you know something, even if the vote is 3-1, maybe I'm entitled to a 3-2 because the judges look at that. And I also don't understand, I'd like the ability to brief, what you've done is fallen squarely within a case called Bequoit. A Bequoit says you can't
How do you spell it?
the existing law when you, the municipality, and when I'm saying you, I'm not talking about your board, I'm talking about the Architectural Review Board, has delayed the matter for in excess of three years, particularly where they reversed themselves on at least a portion of it. So that's the Bequoit case.
Could you
It's
spell
called
it,
a
please?
special circumstances case.
Yeah, how do you spell it?
I'll get it for you. Bequoit was the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals in Brookhaven. And if you want me to brief that out for you, if you want to open it up, I'll brief that out for you. This is the case. The case says that typically a court has to apply the law as it exists at the time of the decision, which means you have to roll with the changes. But if you can demonstrate that the municipality has delayed the decision unreasonably, then you are entitled to rely on the law as it was at the time you actually made the application. And certainly where a municipality has taken in excess of 3.5, 4 years, and then in turn realized that it had made a mistake, I'm entitled to this special circumstances determination. At least let me brief that for you. It might change your mind.
So you're saying the municipality delaying the decision would have been the Architectural Review Board?
The Architectural Review Board determined that neither one of these buildings could be taken down. And despite the fact that in the building department records, which I was able to find, nobody else was able to find it. I actually did the hard work and found it, that the what I call the Bartlett Tree Expert building had been totally rebuilt except for the facade in the 80s. And at that point, the only time this has ever happened, Zach Studenoff agreed that the blue sheet, the historic designation, was incorrect. So they allowed that building to come down, but it took them 3.5 years to get around to doing that. So in this case, it's the Bequoit case. I'd be more than happy to send it to you. It's a special exception to the general rule. Generally, you apply the law as it exists on the date of the decision. But in Becoit, the municipality delayed for a couple of years. I clearly have that here. I've got in excess of 3 years. So I'm entitled to rely on the law that existed at the time the application was filed. I really didn't think this was going to be such an issue. You have an architectural review board recommending that you grant the variances. I thought it was pretty obvious that the applicant had been caught in a delay, none of its own making. I'm quite candidly quite surprised. I think anyone's view alternate to Dan's view is contrary to the law and unreasonable.
John, you're not saying that we've never given decisions with less than 5 members, are you?
You've given decisions with less than 5 members plenty of times when the applicant, as you said it before, said, go ahead and vote. Obviously, because the applicant was confident that they had the votes. I've taken plenty of 3-member decisions because I put the decision in. There was put the case in. There was no adverse comments to it, and I felt confident that the board was going to vote. I've taken plenty of 3-0 decisions, 4-0 decisions.
Everybody knows that you're not saying we've never voted with less than 5.
If the applicant requests, you've never voted than less than 5. It's a little bit unusual because you've never had a period where there was such a deadlock, you haven't been able to fill a position. But that's going to be over in a couple after tonight.
There was an empty seat. I think before Mark came on board, there was an empty seat for a long time. Is that true, Mark? Mark?
Yeah, I can't. It was before my
I'm
time.
sorry, Kevin, I can't hear you.
Okay, we got it.
Probably the longest time that we've had this long a vacancy.
Yeah, this is long now. This is long.
Yeah, this is all right from last January, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
We're looking at 9 months already.
Yep.
Not the applicant's doing.
No, we're not blaming the applicant.
Where's the harm to you? At least let me brief the special. At least let me brief the special exception. The exception to the rule for you. I'll just send you a couple cases on it. I'm confident you'll agree with me.
Okay. Go ahead. Everything
I'm
else?
okay with leaving. I'm okay with not voting on it yet, Kevin.
All right. Mark?
I thought we closed it. Is that not the case, David? Was it closed or?
Closed.
You know, reopen it. You can reopen it. It's Becoit, P-O-K-O-I-K versus Silsdorf, Court of Appeals case.
Right, it was closed. The discussion was when a 5th member was appointed, it would be reopened so that they could hear from John and, review the record.
And so you took the action. You closed it subject to that.
It's going to be a little unfair for whoever the 5th member is to come in cold after we've heard all this for all this time.
Oh, it's a pretty straightforward case.
Well, I mean, I think you'd have to remail, what do you call that? You'd have to send out new mailings anyway. I don't think it's fair to the.
That's fine. We'll do that.
Right, and that was discussed that would have to be renoticed. I'm sure this board's common, not just with this board, but boards all over that have to bring somebody in and get caught up on a matter. So that's not a unique circumstance.
But then how is that any different from just withdrawing it and then, resubmitting it when we have a 5th board member?
Because we have all of the submissions already in the record that have occurred for this amount of time.
But they'd have to be resubmitted anyway for the 5th board member. I'm saying it's a
No,
brand new
the
hearing
material
anyway.
wouldn't. The material's there, the letters and plans and whatnot, that's all there in the file. The renoticing would occur. They'd be able to review the written submissions in the file and would be able to hear from John or anyone else, neighbors, at a public hearing.
And by the way, you had no neighborhood opposition on this. You had support.
There's no neighbors, really.
No. There were the neighbor to the west and wraps around came in represented by their representative, said they had no opposition.
All right. Thank you, John.
Can't hear you guys, sorry.
I said thank you.
Huh?
On the matter of 3065, I thought we had a decision for South Lane. Do we have that decision, David?
Hold on a second. No, not yet.
All
I'm working on that one. It's a long, complicated
have it
matter.
Next week or not?
I will try for next week. I will do my best.
Okay. All the others we had, except for Cohen, Eleanor W. Cohen, that's still around. We got some new information last month. Seems that they did alleviate a whole lot of the problems.
Chick, you're muted.
I just noticed that. Thank you. Kevin, I believe that everything, at least from my notes, and please remind me, I think we had worked this out, that the 50-foot buffer was satisfactory. We
Yeah.
did receive a landscape plan that we found to be satisfactory after that. And my impression from the last meeting was that you wanted to work toward a decision for next Thursday. Am I correct in my recollection?
Yes,
Okay, so I'm going to use the most current plans. They've incorporated the 50-foot buffer. We've spoken about this quite a bit, so I'll proceed to have a decision ready for next Thursday.
very good.
Thank you.
Well, we have the other four, so. Anybody have any comments on those other four decisions?
No,
Padawan, BHMH, and 412. Those are okay.
They were well written, David.
Yeah, they're-
Kudos and compliments to you.
Thank you. It's nice to hear.
Okay,
Right?
wait, Mark.
Nice to get a little positive reinforcement.
Yes.
Pat on the back.
A little pat, right?
Way to go, Dave.
There you go.
Now we have two cases that are pending, 950 on Meadow Lane and the Felix and Elizabeth Wilhoughton Trust.
So Kevin, 950 Meadow Lane.
Huh?
Sorry, let me know when you'd like me to touch base on 950 Meadow.
Well, you can do it right now if you want.
Okay. So this is the one that had the tennis court, the wetlands south of Meadow Lane, and there were retaining walls within 150 feet determined to be a structure, and there was fill. I just received well over 20 megabytes of new files today. I haven't had a chance to look at them in detail, but I think it would be very helpful, since it is a pending case and we have this new material, to have the applicant explain the changes and how they've been responsive to the board's input from the last meeting. I compared the two plans and they did not look that much different to me. But certainly there may be nuances that the applicant can explain that would help us to understand the changes and how they've been responsive. So I don't have any further input for the purpose of the work session, and it's still a pending case.
I do have John Bennett. Chick, is it John?
Yes.
Okay, I do have John Bennett with his hand up. So if you guys do want to hear from him now, as per Chick's comments, I can let him in.
Okay.
Hey, John. Yeah, just your microphone, John.
Thank you. I'll be quick because most of the presentation I'll save for next week. Just in terms of some bullet points, the size of the house went from 15,909 to 13,337. So there's a 2,500 square foot reduction in the size of the house. We moved a good portion of the retaining wall, the westerly portion, which is the one closer to the larger wetlands pocket, an additional 30 feet, an additional 5 feet back. So it's now 130 as opposed to 125. We took the parking court and what are we, Bailey's here with me. We put a good deal of the parking court and the drainage outside the 150. And then finally, I know some folks had some questions about the fill. So we broke out the fill only 1/10 of the fill, only 1/10 of the fill is between 125 and 150. And we also have some very, very, very helpful and I think forceful explanation of why you actually would encourage that based upon the ability for the plant life to flourish there. And all the rest of the fill, so only 1/10 of the fill is within your jurisdiction. And a good portion of the fill, almost probably over 1/3 of it, is for dune nourishment. The rest we've got to fill in the whole of the house that we're moving back out of the coastal erosion hazard line. So I think that's very helpful information for you. And I'll end with that, have a more complete presentation next week. The only thing I did want to say in terms of the neighbor's letter in opposition, I must say it was the strangest opposition I've ever seen. The neighbor wants us to move the septic system, how many feet? 30 feet closer to the wetlands, and the house 80 feet closer to the wetlands. So I'm sort of scratching my head at that, and I'm sure you will too. But I'll leave the rest unless there are any questions for next week.
On the Relative Trust, we have a lot of information here from Linda Riley.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry, guys.
I think we're done with 950 Meadow, John. We appreciate your summary. Thank you.
Oh, you're on to the next one. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Good night, folks. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, John.
Hi, Chick. Chick say he's leaving?
John did, but since you mentioned it,
John left.
why don't you proceed? Go ahead.
On the Relative Trust, we have a lot of information here from Linda Riley, which we'll have to do. This is a matter of law, I guess. Whether we,
Yes and no.
whether we can okay it or whether we can deny it or whatever.
There was submissions by Ms. Riley. I don't know if the board's had a chance to go through them. I know Mark has some feelings on this application. You know, where the timeline in regards to when the properties were merged together by the deeds, when the upzoning occurred. So I'm sure the board will review the material submitted by Ms. Riley. But I think this is in the purview of the board as to whether or not it sounds like the alternative discussion was whether or not this was proper for lot area variances, which are essentially the precedent cases cited by Ms. Riley. All say that they hadn't been granted variances to unmerge, but were properties that had been granted lot area variances. So it's up to the board whether the board feels that that's an alternative they would like to pursue and how the members feel on that.
Okay.
I mean, just to have a little more discussion on this one, you know, I went to the master plan, which is you know, posted on the village website. And if you read through just the executive summary, so it ranks in the executive summary. One of the highlights of the master plan executive summary is a recognition that the 1983 upzoning, you know, fulfilled the goals of the village. That it was an important factor. In fact, the only factor, you know, highlighted as a step in the right direction toward, you know, fulfilling the goals of the master plan. So, you know, given that, I felt that there would be a more substantial burden for any applicant to do anything that you know, contradicts the upzoning, and that's what they're asking to do here. They're in a 3-acre zone, and they're asking for 2 essentially 2-acre properties. And, you know, that's more than I'm inclined to grant, you know, subject to discussion with everybody. But that's why they upzoned. You know, they upzoned so that you wouldn't have 2 substantial houses, you know, built here. It was a way to control density. And what's going to happen here is you can look at it as 2 properties having 2 homes, but that's not the future of these properties. The future of these properties is that both homes will be torn down most probably, and they'll both be developed with, you know, 12,000 square foot homes, pools, and tennis courts. And to look at it as if we're preserving what's there, frankly, would be nice, but that's not what the applicant is intending. The applicant is intending to sell 2 pieces of land instead of 1, so that 2 new houses with pools and tennis courts can be built. And I think that is, you know, something we should take a hard look at.
Yeah, but the alternative is you're gonna have 2 houses on 1 piece of property.
Like we do now.
Well, if
I mean, we have that, you know, one is subservient to the other. There's only 1 swimming pool there. That's how they operate the 2 properties now. That's why properties merge,
I mean,
because they're operating it as 1 property.
they weren't even bought at the same time. They were bought at different times.
Yeah,
I don't think the family ever had any idea that these properties would merge into 1 property.
I think they intentionally merged them.
Oh, I don't think so. I think it was
They
unintentional.
put them in common ownership for some reason.
How long
that's
ago
the
did that
distinct-
happen?
Hmm?
How long ago did it go into common ownership?
Mm,
There was originally 2 pieces of property, correct?
Yes, and then
And,
they
and
transferred
at some
into
point in the
common ownership.
past, how long in the past was it that they merged?
I'm sorry, David, do you have the year?
It was in her first letter. I think it was.
I have her latest here.
Yeah, no, it was in the original.
I just want to know if it was before the master plan.
It was after the upzoning.
It says they acquired the corner lot in September of 1978. And they had required the other lot November 5th, 1990.
That was after the upzoning, but the first one was before the upzoning.
But then when did they put them into common ownership?
November of 2009, according to the letter. Both lots were conveyed to the same trust.
That may have been after he passed away.
Mm-mm.
So
No,
Dan, to answer your question,
It was
Dan,
before.
2009 is after the master plan was drafted.
Right. I mean, they should have been well aware of merging and non-merging of properties. Everybody knows that.
I think that's a-
wasn't it handled by some attorney in the city?
Yeah, I mean, I can guess who handled it, but it was, you know, it was a notable law firm. They were not, I mean,
You may not have-
I don't see a copy of that 1990 deed.
I think I saw Martin Lipton's name on some of the documents. That's Wattell Lipton. That's a pretty prominent New York City law firm.
you know,
They
other-
did the purchase. They did the purchase in 90.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I see their name. I don't have the more recent deed that put them into the same trust.
I'm influenced by the decision we made in the corner of Little Plains Road and Gin Lane. Very similar, but there was only 1 house there, but we allowed the property to be subdivided.
Yeah, but it's a little bit different to me. I thought about that one. That was the one case, at least, that was, you know, in this century. You know, the other cases that Linda cited were all in the 1980s. But he didn't do anything actively. He didn't transfer the properties. You know, he always had that property, and then there was upzoning. You know, so that's one distinction to me, is that he didn't put the properties into common ownership, and he didn't, you know, do anything.
They were,
Also, I do find Little Plains a little bit different than South Main. I mean, South Main does have a property just to the north. Linda made a submission. The property just to the north, the adjacent property, if I look at our map, but I remember, I think it's about 160,000 square feet. The property to the south across the street is 120,000 square feet. So I do find the South Main Gin Lane, you know, particular specific area a little bit different from the Little Plains area.
How many
I agree
lots?
with you, Kevin. I was looking at that one too.
Yeah. How many lots around in that area are 3 acre size anymore?
Let me go to her. I mean, but that's, you know, let me see. Okay.
Exhibit C to her original memorandum is the tax map.
Yeah, so the property to the north is 169,000 square feet. I mean, you have some, the property to the south is 120. The two properties to the west are 108,000 square feet and 102,000 square feet.
So they're all over 2 acres anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them over 3 acres or more.
Mhm.
I'm saying, if they're all the properties around this property were already 2 acre properties, you're not affecting the character of the neighborhood. But if all the properties around this property are larger than 2 acre, and now you're popping in 2 acre, you know, lots, I can see the concern.
my view on this is that it's, to me anyway, they never intended this to happen, and it happened after he died.
Are you thinking they never intended to merge the lots, that they didn't know?
I don't think the owners did, no. They turned it over to their attorney in the city and said, okay, that's it. They didn't know.
I sort of agree with you, Kevin, because I think anybody that would have known wouldn't have let it happen.
He was a very sharp man, made a lot of money.
Everybody, Mr. Roten just passed away in 19. He did not pass away in 9 or 10, but in 19. The decision was made 10 years prior.
So you're saying he knew what he was doing?
100%.
Yeah.
See, why would he want to merge the properties?
I couldn't possibly speak to that.
No, I know.
Well, because they were going to use them. They saw, you know, they saw having this property as one property. You know, I mean, you're right. I can't go into their perspective, but they did merge the properties. But I can't explain what was in their heads at the time. But I do think they did something intentionally to merge the properties.
Okay. You got some different viewpoints in this one.
But I mean, listen. I was influenced, reading the master plan. I mean, as a board, I'm just not sure what we're doing if we see an upzoning and if we see a master plan that states clearly that the upzoning, fulfills the goals of, of the village, and then we say, okay, but let's provide a variance to that upzoning, because why?
If there weren't both houses here, I tend to agree, but there's two houses and were two separate pieces of property.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Kevin. If there was a way to say that these two houses were going to be preserved, I agree with you, but they're not.
No.
those two houses are not going to be there in 5 years.
The two houses became a family compound. And that was, I mean, it seems like it was a clear decision to have the two homes and multi-generations on one property.
I mean, they wouldn't have to merge the properties in order to use it that way. You could still use it that way without merging the properties. They'd own them both, but in different names.
So
True.
basically, up until 1990, these were two separate pieces of property. So when they bought the lot in 1990, then, in other words, originally in 1990, these were two 2-acre pieces of property.
Right, with separate owners operating them separately.
It's something to think about.
Yeah, because the village would have never allowed two houses on one piece of property if they came in to merge it. So it wasn't, it just got merged by the fact that they both were in the same name.
Well, it's also, I mean, there's other factors that you would look into as far as merging goes. I mean, are they operated as one parcel? Yes, they have one swimming pool, and is one, are these homes that, are any of them substantial? I mean, one was an old carriage house, but they had one swimming pool, and they're being operated as one property, essentially. I mean, yes, I might have a different view if there were indications of separate ownership apart from the technical aspect of, putting them into the same deed. But when I looked at the surveys and you see one swimming pool and, relatively modest homes for this property, I leaned more toward, preserving the idea that there was upzoning and we should support the upzoning.
Anybody else? On these new cases, we'll have to read those. We'll have to listen to those next week. But on the 3083, Donna Zilka, 28 Raymond's Lane. I don't know whether you've read some of the emails that Mrs. What's her name? Mrs. Conrad has been sending
Yeah.
to the village office. There was one of them which I thought was not really in very good taste. I mean, you don't accuse someone who works in the village office of not knowing what she's doing, which is what she did. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of emails from her regarding this case. And she.
Only thing I read through the new case.
We have to deny it immediately, which we haven't even heard it yet.
Well, between now and the meeting, read through a lot of these cases. They're asking for big relief on a lot of these cases.
Yeah, but we have to judge it.
Yeah.
Merge to the case.
But Kevin, I would like to get some indication of like where everybody is leaning, for instance, on 199 Cooper's Lane. If we could, I mean, they're asking for a tennis court in the front yard. It's a pretty substantial front yard variance. I mean, I don't know if we had a chance to look at it. I did, but it would be helpful in these work sessions if we had an opportunity to kind of hear where each of us was leaning, rather than hearing it for the first time in the public meeting.
Well,
Yeah, I got to hear it in a public hearing, input,
on the ocean. Only on waterfront, not on Cooper's Farm Road.
Right. Dan, did you want to wait and just hear the public presentation first?
Yeah, I got to hear what there are, I like to hear their argument. I look at it and I say, oh, that's a lot of relief, and then the lawyers and environmentalists all come in and there's mitigating circumstances. I like to have them present their case, to say, well, we could put it over here, but now we're going to be on top of the wetlands, or we have to destroy some huge old growth trees. There's always some kind of mitigating reason, because it looks like on a lot of these applications, they're asking for big relief, you know, so I want to know what the mitigating circumstances are.
As a board, prior to the public meeting, it really shouldn't be kind of a inclination of leaning one way or the other, because that the public meetings, their time to make their case, and you know, we don't want to see as prejudging anything before they've had the chance to really lay it out.
Okay.
I mean, that's all we have, right?
Kevin,
That's
before we close this evening, could I ask the other members of the board if you could indulge me for a moment? I am struggling with the timeline of the delivery of materials for our meetings because today is an example, but I could probably share 10 other moments. I actually have full-time professional obligations, and when we are not given the opportunity to review material until the day of the meeting, after work hours have begun, I'm often left with less than an hour to prepare. And frankly, our work demands more time than that. And I have come to understand, because I have expressed this frustration both with the staff, and they have said to me that it is the prerogative of the members of the zoning board about when materials are due. I have every willingness to read the materials, but I can't do it unless I have 24 hours before the meetings commence.
Well, for
And
the cases, we've got 10 days.
these materials that we just received this morning, I couldn't come tonight having read any of it. And
Talking about
we will receive, Kevin, over the course of the next week. I read Mrs. Conrad's materials because they came into our inboxes throughout the weekend, but I'm struggling with how to manage the influx of material to be fully prepared and also meet the obligations in the timeline. It is the expectation that we are not, it's not necessary for us to have read these materials tonight for tonight's meeting.
I mean, the new cases, is that what you're talking about?
New cases, David sent his materials yesterday, so I was able to read them. But all of the materials that Diane had prepared for us were not available until today.
But the new
And
cases,
I'm asking if, as a board, we could ask for a 24-hour turnaround time from when we get our materials to when we're meeting in a work session. And apparently that is our decision as a group.
I could see that, especially with continuing cases, because lots of times the attorneys put that information in. They know we meet on Tuesday, they put it in on Tuesday. So by the
Exactly.
time that she uploads it and then I get it in an email to my office, it's an hour before, you know, I'm working. I, you know, like you said, you know, you get home, it's 4:30, you go through your email, and like I want to, you know, I want to eat dinner before I actually come here. I don't want to eat late. So it takes me a lot of time.
I'm just really struggling with how this timeline is working. I did today delay my work day, went to Village Hall to pick up the materials for tonight, but didn't actually get a chance to look at them until my work day had concluded. So I'm not giving it the time that it deserves.
well, if we're
So-
talking about the new cases, that's one thing, because we got 9 days to look at that stuff. And then we've got to hear for the first time.
Right, but there is supplemental material that's coming in every time, Kevin.
What?
We're receiving supplemental material
Yeah.
every time just before these meetings.
Yeah, it's just a matter of instituting a guideline that it has to be submitted 24 hours in advance, at least.
For the
Like
work
going into
session.
a public meeting, but yes, I think there'll probably be materials submitted hours before the public meeting, and none of us will have a chance to actually read through them. And yeah, it's
We
not
don't give
comfortable.
decisions at the first meeting anyway. We don't,
No, I'm talking about, yeah, no, we agree, but I'm talking about ongoing matters too. I mean, materials come in the day of the public meeting.
ongoing, I understand. New cases, we hear them for the first time. If they get some information just before the meeting, we got a whole month to digest them. But the old cases, that's a different story. When they come in at the last minute.
So,
I'll ask them, can we, I don't know if we can demand that the attorneys give us the stuff the day before or 2 days before. I don't think it's a problem for the village office if they get stuff in at 3 o'clock on the day of the meeting. What are they supposed to do with it?
apparently it is our prerogative to set a timeline, because I've been asking the question and wanted to bring it to all of you so that we'll have a chance to be adequately prepared.
That's okay.
Right, other boards set a submission deadline to accommodate that. And the expectation is that anything submitted after that deadline is not going to be considered for that next meeting. So that way they know if it's not in by then, even though they can still make the submission, it's more than likely going to wind up with an adjournment so that the board can review the material that came in after that deadline.
Well, we can do that.
And then if the deadline that you set, I think, needs to accommodate a submission time frame so that staff in Village Hall has sufficient time to assemble it and redistribute it to everybody. So, I know you're saying it's 24 hours, but if you said it's got to be submitted 24 hours prior to the meeting, if it's like Kevin just said, if it's submitted at 3 o'clock yesterday, there's no way that you would have it any sooner than you did today, this time around.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the board said everything had to be submitted by noon on, I'm just throwing out examples here, noon on Friday before the work session, and then, speak with staff and see if that provides enough time for them to turn it around so that it would be ready on, Monday afternoon for the board members to pick up.
I will tell you that we do that at the ARB, exactly what David was just saying. I think it's Friday, right, David? You work with Alice, so I think it's.
I believe it is.
Yeah, and then that way it has to be in before, I think it's noon on Friday. They have the packets to get to review for the weekend. And if somebody comes in with a full set of plans on Monday night, they refuse it. It's not fair to the board.
It's fine.
So where do we go from here?
That needs to be made clear in, the application materials that the public is filling out, because that will be something new for all of them, and for council. So to know that this is, for any new application made from this date forward, or for, if we adopt a rule on that, the next meeting, say, here, it's got to be in by this date, otherwise it won't be considered for that next meeting.
So if you compose a letter and they just attach it to every application you give out, they'll have it. It'll be part of the application.
Right. Put it as the last page to the application material, or the first page of it. That here are the timelines for submissions.
Well, I, for one, would be very appreciative and hope that we will do that.
David, what you're saying is if we're going to have a meeting on Thursday, the regular meeting, they'd have to have it in on Wednesday. Sometime Wednesday, right?
Well, if we have a work session on a Tuesday, they have to have it in on Monday.
Okay.
Well, no, this is up to the board. What I'm saying is, if you say it's got to be in by Monday, that submission time could be, you could set it at noon, you could set it at, but if it comes in at noon, I don't know if staff has enough time to turn around that material and get it out to the board members before 5 o'clock on Monday. So you'd still be stuck in the same position you were today of receiving material at, 8:30, 9 o'clock, going to work all day, and then trying to review it at 5 o'clock before the meeting.
Right.
I think the board would need slightly more time than that so that it could be processed accordingly by staff and turned around.
So it would have to be Friday then.
Hey, there's always the other option. If you don't think you've had enough time to review it, we can adjourn the meeting. We can adjourn the application off to the next meeting,
I think
which is what we've done.
Julia is trying to, and Mark are trying to set expectations. I think now it's kind of expected that if I get it in before the meeting, you guys will be reviewing it and discussing it.
But
Well, and I think the professionals involved will adjust. You know, I mean, the lawyers are good. They'll submit their materials a little bit earlier.
we've said at the meetings many times over and over again, we just got this, we haven't had time to really discuss it. We'll discuss it between now and the next meeting. We've said that many times. That's an easy way to, I don't want to complicate things. I want to keep things.
I actually, Kevin, frankly, I think it would make things easier. If it was a reliable group of materials rather than drip, 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 which is the way it's coming in.
Well, they always.
I understand it's a change and I know that's difficult, but it is.
The lawyer is going to change things, or the landscape architect is going to change something. So even if you heard the case 3 times, look at the Stone case. How many times have we heard that? And we're still looking for changes on that. That's the nature of the beast. That people are going to change something, or we're going to ask them to change something often. Or they're going to change it on their own.
In part, what's happening though is that for those who have full-time professional obligations, 9 to 5, it is nearly impossible to be properly prepared for each meeting in a way that is fair to the role or to each of you because of the way the materials are coming in.
And I think not to put words in Julia's mouth or any of the other board members, but you say the Stone case, I think that's a example where stuff would trickle in. You'd still have a public hearing that night, kind of get a half summary, and then still have to adjourn. So the board spent a half an hour getting a summary on material that they hadn't had a chance to review, and we're still going to need more time to review before an actual discussion could be had at either the next work session or questions for the applicant at the next public hearing.
But we take the time. We adjourn it till the next meeting. That's what we've always done. I can see if you have a full-time job, it would be difficult, but I don't have a full-time job anymore.
Yeah, but I do, Kevin. So that's why I'm
But
asking for all of you for your forbearance and indulgence.
I was
so
doing
that I can have this opportunity. I would like to continue to be able to serve adequately,
Sure.
but it's very difficult to do so in the current circumstances.
I had a full-time job when I first came on the board for many years.
Well, you're clearly more talented than I.
For the last 4 years, I haven't had a full-time job.
Why can't we say for the public meeting, materials have to be submitted by the Tuesday, before at noon? And for the work session, they have to be submitted by noon on Friday.
That's fine.
I would very much appreciate it.
Next time I'm in Village Hall, which will be tomorrow probably, I will mention that to Diane. And they're gonna have to make it clear to the applicants what's happening.
Can I have that one more time? It's Tuesday at noon for the public hearing,
Yes,
and it's Friday at 12 for the work session, correct?
work session.
Correct.
Yeah, we got someone in Village Hall there who already knows now.
I'm not in Village Hall, but I can send an email if you would like, Kevin, to her as well. So
That'd
that
be fine, that'd be fine.
And I'll check with Alice and see. I think they said, like Antoinette said, they either put a letter or amended their application to let the applicants know about these deadlines.
Okay, good. Does that kind of take care of that problem?
Totally. And I appreciate it very much.
Very good. Do we have anything else to come before this meeting? Not much, right?
No,
Can I have a motion to close this work session?
I move.
I have a second.
I'll second.
The work session of September the 15th of 2020 is now closed. Southampton Village ZBA.
Thank you, everybody.
Next week.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
night.
Cool.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
We're off.